Ever feel like you're stuck on that self-improvement treadmill, going nowhere fast?
Yeah, I know that feeling.
We're diving into Atomic Habits today. This book, it's like trading that treadmill for a Sherpa.
This book really is something else.
Mhm.
It's not just another self-help pep talk.
Right. It's all about these tiny changes, atomic habits. They can lead to some seriously big results.
What I find fascinating is how James Clear digs into the science behind it. He pulls back the curtain on how our brains actually form habits, the good and the bad.
So it's less about willpower and more about understanding the mechanics of how our minds work.
Exactly. It's empowering.
Hmm.
You're not just told what to do. You understand why those small changes are so powerful.
It's like we're getting a behind-the-scenes tour of our own minds.
Yeah.
And learning how to tweak the system.
Precisely. You know how you mentioned wanting to write more consistently?
Oh yeah, big goal of mine.
Instead of aiming for a novel right away, what if you shifted your thinking? What if you focused on becoming the kind of person who just naturally writes every day, even if it's just a paragraph?
I see what you're saying. It's about embodying the identity of a writer first.
That's the heart of Atomic Habits.
Yeah.
It's about long-term identity change, not quick fixes.
It's so easy to get caught up in those quick fixes, but they rarely stick.
They don't. It's like trying to build a house on sand. No foundation. You need that solid base.
Which is our identity, the
Yeah.
kind of person we are at our core.
Exactly. Clear uses this example of a 1% improvement each day. Sounds small, right?
Yeah, it doesn't sound like much.
But think about it. Over a year, those tiny gains compound into something massive, like almost 38 times better.
Wow, I never thought about it like that.
And the reverse is true, too. Even tiny negative habits, those slip-ups we all have, they can hold us back more than we realize.
It's like the snowball effect.
Hmm.
But for our habits, small things building up over time.
That's a great way to put it. And that brings us to what Clear calls the 4 laws of behavior change. This is where the rubber meets the road, the practical framework for building those atomic habits.
I'm ready to ditch the treadmill and lace up my hiking boots. Let's hear it.
All right, so he breaks it down into 4 stages. Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. It's like a recipe for habit formation.
Sounds simple enough, but I'm sure there's more to it than meets the eye. A recipe for habit formation. I like it. So tell me more about this first law. Make it obvious.
Well, it's all about those cues, those triggers that kickstart our habits. You mentioned struggling to fit in workouts, right?
Ugh, don't remind me. It's a constant battle.
Picture this. You finish your morning coffee. That's already a habit. And right after you do even 5 minutes of stretching.
Okay, so I'm basically piggybacking off an existing habit, like stacking one on top of the other.
Clear calls it habit stacking. It's more powerful than you might think. You're basically using the momentum of that existing routine to your advantage.
So instead of trying to create this whole new routine from scratch, I'm just like inserting this new habit into my existing flow.
Precisely. And it makes it way more likely you'll actually follow through. Because,
Yeah.
let's face it, starting is often the hardest part.
Oh, tell me about it. Once I actually get going, I'm usually good. But that initial hurdle.
Exactly. And another key part of making it obvious is your environment. Remember you were saying how hard it is to focus in a cluttered space?
It's like trying to meditate in the middle of a rock concert. My brain just can't handle it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If your workspace is chaotic, it's going to be a constant uphill battle to stay focused.
So decluttering my desk, decluttering my mind, it's all connected.
Think of it like this. You're setting the stage for success before you even start the task.
Okay, I'm sold on make it obvious. What's next?
Let's talk about make it attractive. This is where we tap into our brain's love for rewards, that dopamine hit.
Ooh, this sounds dangerous. Tell me more.
Think about the things you genuinely enjoy. Maybe listening to a podcast or, scrolling through social media. What if you only allowed yourself those things while tackling a chore you've been putting off?
Wait, so I can only listen to my favorite true crime podcast while I fold laundry? That's actually genius.
You're basically tricking your brain into associating that chore with something pleasurable.
Love it. I'm all for outsmarting my own brain. So we've made it obvious. We've made it attractive. Where do we go from here?
This is where Make It Easy comes in. The name says it all. It's about reducing friction, as Clear calls it. You're way more likely to go to the gym if your gym bag's already packed and ready to go.
It's like removing all those tiny obstacles, those little excuses our brains come up with.
Precisely. Every little bit of effort you can remove makes a difference.
And what about those habits that still feel daunting, even after all that?
That's where the 2-minute rule comes in handy.
Ah, yes. Break it down into bite-sized pieces.
Exactly. Instead of pressuring yourself to write for an hour, just commit to 2 minutes. You might surprise yourself
Yeah.
and keep going. But even if you don't, you've still reinforced that habit loop.
It's about consistency, not intensity, right?
Got it. It's about building that momentum over time.
So we've made the habit obvious, we've made it attractive, we've made it easy. How do we make it satisfying?
That's the fourth and final law. Make it satisfying. It's all about that instant gratification, that little dopamine hit that makes us want to repeat the behavior. The problem is, good habits often have delayed rewards. We don't see the results of eating healthy or exercising consistently until weeks or even months later.
It's like the slow burn versus the instant gratification of ordering pizza after a long day. That pizza feels so good in the moment, even though it might not be the best choice for my long-term well-being.
Exactly. Clear emphasizes the importance of creating a reward system for those good habits. One of his best suggestions is tracking your progress.
There's something so empowering about seeing a visual representation of your growth. You mentioned using a habit tracking app. Maybe you could share which one you like best.
I'm currently using Habitica, which gamifies the whole process. It's a fun way to stay motivated, but the key is to find what works for you. The important thing is to celebrate those small wins, no matter how small they might seem.
Speaking of those small wins, Clear also talks about this phenomenon called the plateau of latent potential.
This is where it gets really interesting. It's the point where you're consistently putting in the effort, but you're not seeing much progress yet. It can be incredibly frustrating.
I know that feeling all too well. It's easy to want to give up when you feel like you're not making any headway.
Clear compares it to an ice cube melting. You're applying heat, the temperature's rising, but you don't see any visible change until suddenly the ice starts to melt. It's a slow, incremental process, but the results are there. We just have to be patient and trust that those tiny, consistent efforts will eventually lead to a breakthrough.
That's a great analogy. It's like those atomic habits are working their magic behind the scenes, even if we don't see the immediate results. And that's where the power of atomic habits really shines. It's about understanding that real change isn't about quick fixes or magical solutions. It's about those tiny, consistent steps that lead to big, lasting transformations.
It's about building the you want to become, one small habit at a time. And I think that's the most empowering takeaway from this book. We have the power to shape our own destiny, even if it's one tiny, almost invisible step at a time.
So I'll leave you with a little food for thought. If you could design your ideal day, what one small habit change would have the biggest ripple effect on your life? Think about it, and let's get those atoms moving.